On this week's Against the Current, we're talking to Chicago Tribune page 2 columnist John Kass. Is it page 2, page 3? I mean, I guess there's not pages anymore.
There are pages. It's page 2 for now.
And you've been page 2 columnist for the Tribune for almost 20 years.
Since Royko died.
Yeah. So let's start there. What is it, your 20 years of experience, well, it's been more than that, but your 20 years almost as the page 2 columnist, following in the giant footsteps of Mike Royko. What is it about Chicago politics that people, even in Chicago, don't understand?
That they don't understand?
That they don't understand. Or do they understand it?
I think they do. I think they understand it, and I think that they've been terrified for decade after decade, when you think about it.
Well, what are they
terrified? You have these warlords who controlled the city and controlled everything about a neighborhood. The licensing and registration, you want a liquor license, it's all that stuff.
The aldermanic feudal lords.
Everything about it. Not only aldermanic, in City Hall itself, and guys who own the aldermen. So I think people have understood it. What they're coming to now is the strong personalities are getting old or passing. We've got one great boss left in Springfield, but he's also the boss of Democratic politics throughout the state. And the money is gone. The money's gone.
The money's gone at City Hall?
The money's gone at City Hall. The money's gone in the state. There's no money.
Well, wait a second. The money's gone, yet there's money to finance a new stadium for DePaul at McCormick Place. There always seems to be money for the pet projects of a particular ward boss, or if the mayor, who I would suggest maybe is one of the other remaining political bosses, if the mayor wants something, they always find the money. I mean, you have unanimity among the bond rating agencies that CPS is bankrupt, and yet that doesn't stop them from borrowing.
He borrowed, what, $500 million?
And right before he borrowed $1.1 billion.
This is Greece. I'd suggest Chicago economically in Illinois is a plate of flaming cheese. You just light it.
Oompa?
Oompa, not Oompa. This is not Willy Wonka.
Oh, well, you know, I'm not the son of Greek immigrants.
Right. But that's what it is.
Okay,
and so they know it. They know I think most people in the city know that doom is coming. The reckoning is coming. There are not enough police officers out there. Kids are getting shot all the time. There are festivals, of course. I don't know when it'll be brought home to the white people in this town. I know that if you're African American or Latino, you understand, and live in those communities, you understand the violence and the barbarism. Just the other day, there was a shooting on the Kennedy. Right, there was some gunshots on the Kennedy, and I thought maybe they'll start to get it now, but I don't know what happened to it. But it's coming. A reckoning is due. This is 40. This is I don't know how many years, a century of neglect and overspending and boodle and corruption. These are the stables of King Augeas. This is the...
Well, so who cleans the stables? I mean...
You have to divert the river.
Well, okay. Well, you have people in this town that can read a balance sheet, that understand unfunded pension liabilities. And the people I'm talking about are police officers and firefighters. You don't have to be a C-suite executive to understand what you're describing. But you have a lot of corporate titans in the city with a lot of money. They understand where the city is financially.
And they've been complaining. For quite some time.
Well, and you have rank and file city workers that understand because their livelihood is on the line, their pensions are on the line, they understand it. You have other people that are professionals because the city is increasingly being hollowed out, where you have to really be making a killing financially in order to live in one of the bright, shiny wards. So if everybody understands it, what does it take to precipitate a revolt? Do people really believe that there's a reckoning coming? Because they've been hearing that there's a reckoning coming for a long time from columnists like you, and the reckoning hasn't really come.
They keep kicking the can down the road. That's the unfortunate, line. But sooner or later, you can't do it anymore. It's coming now. I mean, the schools are going to be bankrupt. Ken Griffin, Bruce Rauner, And a lot of the big money guys in town have been warning about this for for years, that it's coming. And I don't see Mayor Rahm Emanuel doing anything about it.
So it's going to take the eventuality.
Chaos and crisis is
Well,
how they usually govern.
Well, what does that look like? Is that going to be a police officer, a firefighter, a Chicago public school teacher who's retired 1 month, gets an IOU in the mail instead of their pension check, and then all heck breaks loose? Or what's it going to look like?
I don't know what precipitates it, but sooner or later the money runs out. The schools are going to go bankrupt. The city
Schools are bankrupt.
The cities are, but I mean formally.
Yes.
The city is at junk bond status now. We haven't seen the new property taxes come in. There's property taxes are going to go up to cover the more Bowering. How much money did they spend on this ridiculous bike trail up north, the 606?
I mean, once you're in for Maggie Daly Park, you're in for 606. This is what I'm talking about. Right. There's always money for an honorific to a politician. Right. Or for something to divert attention away from all these structural problems. And so it goes back to that question. Do people really know? Or is it the case that Eric Hoffer described? You're a deep thinker. You know Eric Hoffer.
He was a longshoreman.
And he was a longshoreman.
Thank you.
Theory of mass movements. He said, look, people will continue to vote the status quo with the exception of two things. Here's the only way you get a popular revolt. If people believe that things can improve and people believe they're in charge of their own destiny. And is it the case that people know all the things you're describing, but they don't think things can improve, at least not at their hands, because they don't think they're in control of their own future? And so they're content to re-elect Rahm Emanuel, they're content to re-elect most of the trained SEALs on the city council?
I don't think that they feel that they're in control of their own destiny. And I think they've been trained, the people of Chicago have been trained over decades, right, to think in terms of the strong man. The great man, the one that will pull all these levers and make magic.
And that's essentially what Rahm Emanuel.
It's a Stalinist view.
So they bought it for old Mayor Daley. They bought it for young Mayor Daley. Now they're buying it again for Rahm.
Isn't it odd that now Daley had to leave because he was uncovered. I mean, he had to go. If he had not left, they would have lost control. So in comes Rahm Emanuel, sort of caretaker.
But that wasn't how he came in. He came in. He was going to make the hard decisions.
That's what he said.
Right.
Has he?
I
would say no.
No, doesn't seem to be the case. But it also doesn't seem like he's suffered as a result. Yeah, he had a.
No, he hasn't really.
He had a little bit of a struggle with Chuy Garcia runoff that was kind of embarrassing. But at the end of the day, that was a bump in the road.
He hasn't suffered enough for what he's done.
So
really, I mean, politically, I don't want the man to suffer personally, but politically, he's gotten away with it.
Well, and that's the story of Chicago. So I go back to say, how is Chicago different? You follow this nationally. How is Chicago different than New York City, which had a revolt after David Dinkins' tenure, and they did something completely different? Even Los Angeles, there was a blip there where they elected Richard Riordan, or erstwhile Republican,
right.
But that was still a sea change for LA. Those are cities that are much more culturally liberal than Chicago. So why no revolt here?
Why do you think?
Well, I don't know. I don't know the answer. I mean, again, it's kind of the thing you think about at the state level. If it was my prediction, I would have thought that we would have pitchforks and torches a decade ago, like second term of Rod Blagojevich. But as you said, it seems like there's a particularly virulent strain of Stockholm Syndrome that affects Chicago and Illinois, whereby we identify with the next captor who comes along and it says, it's going to be the land of milk and honey if you just listen to what I say and allow me to do what I want to do.
Part of the great sin of corruption is not only that it takes your money and perverts your government, but it actually perverts the people. So that they're waiting for the next guy. Maybe I could get something out of him. Mm-hmm. I don't want.
So that's what happens.
I don't want a level playing field. What I want is an advantage.
So this is a kleptocracy.
Of course it is.
Right. So this is the banana republic, which is, look, I see how this works.
The political birthplace of Barack Obama.
Well, and many before him
Yes,
that are
but I
similarly
mean-
inclined.
This is it. So the people themselves have been corrupted to think, when Ron was running for mayor this last time, oh, we better not have Chewy because we'll have Detroit, right? Mark Kirk brought this up, the Rhino Republican, famous for his little pithy statements like the bro with no hole.
I'm familiar with his work, yes.
Yeah.
And so you've been in the city for almost 6 decades.
Almost, yeah. Or around it.
How did you figure it out? How did you come to understand how the city worked?
When I was a little boy, I worked for my father in our grocery store, supermarket. And the alderman's guys came to the door, knocked on the door, came in. It was a Mutt and Jeff act. Big guy, little guy. Ferret-faced little guy, big, beefy, beef eater.
Right. Lenny and George.
Lenny and George, except, no, they're two.
Neither one of them were nice.
Right.
Yeah.
And they opened up a bag, like a shopping bag. I don't know if they opened it or my father opened it. And within minutes, ribeye steaks, the way we used to package them, 2 ribeye steaks in a cellophane package that we'd wrap. And they're about this thick, and they fit one after the other neatly into a bag. So you could jam a lot of steaks.
And they just had you put that on their house account. Right?
As if they were paid back.
Right, of course.
So I filled it up, and my father was smiling. And he turned to me in Greek and said, Siga, don't say anything, slowly, be careful. And they smiled and said, oh, these are great steaks, Greek. Thanks. And they walked out. And I was like 8 or 9 years old, and I was angry. Well, see, we never had red steaks at home.
Because the politicians and their henchmen had them.
No, because if they were red, we could sell them. Right? Because when you're working on 2% profit margins, you don't eat your profit. The brown steaks were what we had. The brown bananas. That's a shopkeeper's meal, right? Whatever's over. They took those steaks and walked out, and my father just explained to me, he said, this is how things are done here. Right? This is how things are done.
So,
and I thought, Danny, what kind of I was upset. And later on, I brought it up. I said, we were at, a Sunday dinner, the ethnic Sunday dinner at one aunt's house or an uncle's house. It's all the same people. And we're talking, and the kids got to talk at this dinner. We had the King's man, the Roosevelt's guy, and everyone in between. And I said, can't you guys get involved in politics? Can't we get involved in politics? And they looked at me like I was insane. I said, what? Don't you know that they could ruin you? They could ruin us.
So this was tithing to the machine.
I learned from an early age.
20th thing.
I learned from an early age what it was about. It was about brute force, using government, right, as the hammer to take people's stuff for their pockets or their kids. It's always been that way.
So it's a legalized shakedown racket, effectively.
Yeah, effectively. That's what machine politics are, whether it's Tammany Hall or Chicago City Hall.
And so at the time, they were making sure, to borrow a phrase from the Tiny Dancer administration, they were making sure that you abided Chicago values.
Yeah, I don't know what he meant by Chicago, those aren't our values, but the values that were expressed and have been expressed repeatedly to everyone with a business in town, whether you're a small shopkeeper or a big hedge fund manager is the boss decides.
So why is it the people that are not the little shopkeeper, the people that have dominion over the big shiny buildings, the billionaires in this town, you're kind of referencing a couple of them, why is it that they play the same game? Because they don't have to play the same game, they choose to.
I don't think they are. I think that unlike if Chicago were this table and we were deciding things, in the old days, it would be the mayor, Mayor Daley the first, the Protestant bankers, the labor union guys, the Chicago outfit, and other maybe black ministers or whatever. There'd be constituencies at this table.
The five families, as it were.
Well, in recent times, I've noticed, or at least I'm getting the feeling, and perhaps you can correct me if I'm wrong, that the equestrians, as I call them,
No.
Realize what they can see the future, and they're vested here, so they want something done.
The equestrians you're talking
Meaning the
about.
leader, the money guys, the guys who have a lot of money in the city, particularly real estate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they want something done, so they, I think, made sure that Rahm was the one who came in, thinking he would do things that were necessary, like not let Karen Lewis roll him in the first teacher strike, and he was rolled, and everything went to hell from there. And I think he lost a lot of props with a lot of people.
So you mentioned the outfit. You mentioned a couple times. You are the one who turned me on to this great book about Chicago's history called The Outfit by Gus Russo, who was a former NPR reporter.
Yeah.
Which is the history of Chicago. And it seems like there's not a lot that's changed since the city was incorporated about 175 years ago.
Right.
So is the outfit, the mob, organized crime, is that still real in the city? I know I read your columns religiously. You talk about the Grand Avenue crew and this crew, and the crews that were in the south suburbs.
I don't think
and they moved west. But they migrated.
Chinatown West, as we call it up there, along 83.
Well, right, Oak Brook Terrace and the like. Well, so is that still real, and is that a part of it? And do they use? And if it is real, how do they use government, or how does government use them?
In the old days, they would dictate who got liquor licenses, who was able to build, high rises. I don't think they have the power they had in days past. They're still around, and there are people out there who can end your career.
In one form or the other.
There are a few. The new money is, of course, drug money. Mexican drug lords like this El Chapo fellow, and having real estate and safe houses right near the airport, right near Midway Airport, where tens of millions of dollars are shipped out every day. I mean, that's a lot of money, and they need muscle on the street.
So are those new gangsters, the 21st century gangsters, late 20th and 21st century gangsters?
These are the new ones.
Do they control the politicians the way the old Italian outfit members control politicians?
I don't know if they do. I would be surprised that if certain people don't have telephone calls and can say, hey, we'd like this or that, and if we don't get it, your ears will be in a box delivered to Kelsey Grammer. Right?
Right.
I think
the boss. So that was right. So the Kelsey. Unfortunately, short-lived.
I didn't like that show.
You didn't like?
No, because
I thought it was excellent. It was like 15 degrees hyperbolic.
In one of his great basso profundo soliloquies on the steps, or I think it was the rooftop of City Hall, he started talking about Cermak and how Cermak was, did this, that, and the other thing, and he was great or something, and he didn't mention that Cermak was killed by the outfit.
Right. Well, I mean, but
so I'm like right there. So
okay.
To you, Kelsey.
Well, not to turn into dueling TV show critics, but one of the
we could do that.
One of the leitmotifs for that show, if you remember your, post-secondary English class,
Yeah.
Was change on the outside to protect continuity on the inside.
Right.
In other words, the ersatz change, right? Wasn't that an accurate description of what we have here?
I think so. Because right now you have Rahm Emanuel presiding over a corrupt system and giving mouth, talking about how he's trying to improve things, but really, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's gone so far, the money is so, the ink is so red that there's nothing to be done. Until there's a chaos, until there's a storm, I don't want to say hurricane,
or
but a storm.
Or somebody bites the bullet and says, we have to reorganize our debt the way Detroit did.
But they don't bite, politics tells me that you don't bite, you don't lead. You wait until there's chaos and then you try to organize the chaos for your advantage. That's how it's usually done. So, for those of us who are hoping for some person to do the right thing, and for Rahm Emanuel or Rauner or any other, or Mike Madigan, for God's sake, to say, let's cut this, they won't.
Yeah, but why would they?
Why do they?
I mean, because all of those...
Until we were hit by the storm.
Well, why would Mike Madigan, the longest-serving speaker in U.S. history at the state level, John Cullerton has been in Springfield for 40 years, and it's done quite well, why would they change anything? Because the way they've operated has served them very well. So why would they change anything? It's not like they've been chastened by electoral outcomes. They're both presiding over supermajorities in the General Assembly. So why should they change, right?
They have no reason to change.
So we get the government we deserve.
Well, for 20 years I've been writing about debt and spending, right? And people say, you're full of it. Well, no one's listening to you. And I'm like, Cassandra. Right now, Christian McQuarrie writes about it, and she, you know what I mean? A few of us have written about it. A few of us have tried to warn people. You have.
Well, it's funny, even predating us, I mean, you go back to Lieutenant Governor Paul Simon, back in the early 70s, writing a piece in one of the downstate newspapers he owned, of course, family owned, talking about the $1 billion in unfunded liabilities in the teachers' retirement system at the state level. $1 billion in unfunded liabilities, and we've got to do something about it.
What's it
40
now?
Years ago. Now it's $50 billion.
And what's the total pension liability in the state? Between $150 and $200 billion.
When you include unfunded health care benefits too, sure.
Right?
Yeah. Right. So that's
so everyone's I mean, everybody I know who can leave is leaving.
Yeah, that's.
So what's left?
Well, this is the story, right? Everybody who can get out will, or it has been for the last, at least the better part of the last 15 years. Those people that saw the gathering storm,
right? And
then the conversation you have with almost anybody
is who has the bonds.
With any means. Well, that's a different conversation, but the conversation with ordinary people who aren't politically connected is their exit strategy from Illinois, from Chicago. Right? There's a reason Chicago has the lowest population level it's enjoyed since 1920. That's not an accident, right? And so, do you see any prospects for turnaround, to borrow the governor's term, on the horizon?
I see that if Bruce Rauner does not win his battle with Mike Madigan, that the whole thing goes to hell.
And you mean the battle in this fiscal year, this current budget battle? This is not something. In other words, this is where a line has to be drawn, and you got to stand that line.
This is where it starts. And if he doesn't win, if Rauner doesn't come out of this, somewhat successfully, people will just flee. And I think he knows that. And the people around him know that. And I think Madigan knows it too. Now, how do you get Madigan? I've suggested you take out Berrios, for example. Joe Berrios is the Cook County assessor. He's also the chairman of the Democratic Party in Cook County, but he's really Madigan's toady. You have to take him out. You take him out, and that's happening right now as we speak. As we sit here, that's going on. So we'll see. It's one of the first steps, and sort of, there are two wars. There's the war of rhetoric, and then the war of leverage.
Yeah,
I'm speaking to you about the war of leverage.
Yeah, but about Mike Madigan, everybody, especially on the Republican side, focus on Mike Madigan. He's the boogeyman. He's the power broker, and he is the power broker. He's the most powerful politician in the state. Very few dispute that. But here's the rub: you get rid of Mike Madigan tomorrow, and what changes?
You break up that system. And I like chaos. It's called freedom.
Yeah, but why?
It's called liberty.
Yeah.
I kind of like it. I know it's,
Well,
it might be. You might laugh at it, but I think it's important.
But I don't laugh at that. But here's what I suggest, or I ask.
Will some downstate Republican, big union toady move in?
Downstate Republican? No. Right? What happened to the city of Chicago? You replace Old Daley with Young Daley with Rahm, and much change. There was continuity. So why not? Somebody replaces Mike Madigan as the head of as the Speaker of the House, the panjan drum over the supermajority, and maybe they're a little bit less skilled than he is, but essentially you have continuity.
That's what you're hoping for. Someone who's less skilled, less ruthless.
Well, but you could argue that Rahm is less skilled, but we haven't seen substantial changes. He's been there 5 years.
And then what do we want? A counterweight, a counterbalancing force that's more skilled and more ruthless?
No, I want the opposite.
See?
But what I'm suggesting is because Madigan goes away doesn't necessarily mean this whole thing gets broken up. Because it didn't happen at the City of Chicago level. And the City of Chicago is just a model we've exported to Springfield and then to D.C., isn't it?
Mike Madigan has more talent in his little finger than Rich Daley had in his entire body. Okay? And until he goes, nothing changes. And he's got to go because he not only handles the legislature, but the judges from the Supreme Court all the way down to some flunky's son who's made traffic court judge.
In the time remaining, I want to talk about the state of journalism, because where is the fourth estate while this is all
I'm sitting right here.
I'm
sitting right here.
Must be lonely, one-man gang? I mean, is that right? Or a couple-person gang? Seriously, the Chicago Press Corps mirrors the Washington Press Corps in being largely complicit with everything that's going on, with a few exceptions, a few voices of the wilderness like yourself.
That argument, I take umbrage.
Oh, issue and umbrage,
right.
Both.
I take umbrage because I've heard it so often.
Does that mean it's untrue?
Listen to me, or listen to what I'm going to tell you because the others aren't telling you the truth. I think that in the main, the newspapers are doing a great service at a time of incredible upheaval. The Tribune, particularly, it's watchdog reporting. There are great reporters at the Sun-Times that do it as well. If we're not doing it, nobody's doing it. Who's doing it? I mean, you have a radio show 4 times, but if we're not doing it, you're not.
5 times a week, but
5
it's
times
counting.
a week.
Yeah.
Sorry, but you know what I mean, every day.
Yes.
But you don't have the time or the resources to do what the papers are doing.
Yeah, but do you think that, I mean, again, I understand there's some good investigative journalists,
Right.
I understand there's some good columnists, but as a consortium, do you think the Chicago Press Corps has challenged the power structure as stridently as it should have, given all the problems you've described as we've talked?
When I started writing this column, I would hear from the wise men of the press, wait a minute, what are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you going after Rich Daley like this? And I started looking at them in a way that I hadn't looked at them before. There are those who suck up to favor. It's rather Byzantine. I don't want to sound like a college sophomore, but there's a certain, toting and sucking up factor, particularly in broadcast. Not on conservative talk, but there's no conservative talk except your program, your station.
Well, sure, because they all want their jobs after they wash out of broadcast or journalism.
A very damaging and upsetting thing that's going on, where the David Axelrod, who's the mouthpiece for Rich Daley and Barack Obama, establishes a school at the University of Chicago.
The Institute for Political Skullduggery, I believe that's the title.
I don't think it's a formal title, but
effective.
They have a school, and they sort of give I don't know, what are they, pensions, secure places to land, if you're part of the politic.
I believe in academia we call those sinecures.
Right, okay, so you have people.
The Michelle Obama positions.
And she was making $300K, right? So you have people leaving journalism to work there. That's very upsetting. The fact that we don't really have good press criticism is upsetting. We have Rob Feeder does a good job in terms of who's where and who's what and who's getting up and down. I thought Steve Rhodes from the Beachwood Reporter, although he's far to the left, is consistent, intellectually honest. The Reader, what can you say? And we don't have...
You've got Ben Jaworski does some good reporting on TIFs, but
right.
Not a lot beyond that.
But I mean, I'm talking about media criticism, so we don't have that in this town.
So, but is there a certain amount of groupthink that sets in with the Chicago press corps, like the Washington press corps, then the combination of people that are powerful that they want access to, along with kind of the professional agitator class that is looking...
Like me and you?
Well, who? The professional agitator class? Yeah. No, I'm talking about the people that, it's not, you can't disagree with me. If you disagree with me, I'm going to take you out.
Yeah, well...
Right? That they're protesting at Pioneer Court if somebody says
all
a
cities matter.
Right.
All cities matter.
Yeah, that
right.
that whole rap.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is that part of what drives editorial decisions as somebody who kind of has an inside look?
I don't know what drives editorial decisions. I'm not sitting on the editorial board. I am the pink flamingo on the broad lawn of the Tribune.
Wow.
I don't.
Interesting metaphor.
I'm not involved in what the newspaper does. They don't come to me and say, "Should we endorse Barack Obama?"
The second time?
The second time, no one asked me that.
Should we give?
I wouldn't have endorsed him the first time.
Should we give Rahm Emanuel a B+ for his first year in office? I believe that was the grade.
I did not have my red pencil that day.
Right. Well, but I mean, so I mean,
I'm the one who in the paper called for a runoff between he and Chuy Garcia, and then as soon as we got it, 3 days later, I was off the radio.
Right. Yeah, you better be careful what you call for.
Right.
Well, but so as a content producer, what is your? I mean, no, but you're a content producer, original content producer in the digital age,
right?
Where not a lot of people are getting the Sunday Tribune at the end of their driveway anymore, or the Sun-Times, or any other major daily. It's not just the Tribune, of course. And it was interesting. News Corp CEO down at a conference.
Yeah, what happened?
Talked about Google and Facebook as frauds, as kleptocrats, stealing other people's
That's what they do.
work, right? So what is the role?
Huffington Post and all those aggregators.
Yeah, okay, right. So what is the role for someone who's an original content producer in the digital age that has fourth estate / watchdog responsibilities like you and some of your colleagues?
I don't know how this whole thing's going to shake out, Dan. I don't. I'm a guy pushing 60 with 2 kids in college, and I'm trying to get them through school and not betray or break my covenant with the readers. And sometimes it's difficult, especially given the pressures of the business.
Well,
so what I've decided to do is just keep doing what I've been doing. And the hell with it.
Well, and the pressures of the business are...
Because I'll shovel whatever it is with my hands for my kids before I suck up to David Axelrod or one of those people for a gig after this.
And
it's not going to happen.
And just on the pressures of the business,
yeah.
These predate the Obama White House. So you, I know, had a bit of a run-in with Mayor Richard M. Daley, where he tried to have you shoveling somewhere else other than the Tribune.
You remember once when the mayor held a news conference to say that Wrigley Field was unsafe? There's chunks of cement falling off this thing. I don't know. There's chunks of cement falling around here.
It's a heck of a Richard M. Daley impersonation, by the way.
Yeah, he tried, and then the WGN transmitter was emitting strange waves or something. I forgot what he said, but it was something ridiculous. He was just hammering the paper. And my newspaper, to its credit, never asked me to stop, to pull a punch, to make nice. Never.
And how long ago was that?
Yeah, I don't know when he was in.
Well,
10 years ago?
8
years ago?
Has that changed?
I've never been asked by my newspaper to pull a punch. Ever.
Do you think that's the case across media outlets?
I don't know. I'm not in those other media outlets. What do you think?
I think that it's likely that people are asked to pull punches.
I don't think it's how that's, self-censorship is one of the most frightening aspects of a modern journalist, and I don't think that it happens the way you say.
Well,
I think what happens is that that we've become, Americans at one time, our iconic American was an independent, right? A man on the edge of the wilderness, a cowboy, independent thinker. We've become rather Byzantine in even our heroes. Jack Bauer, for example, Jack Bauer, 24, is a killer bureaucrat. He kills you, and then he says, "I'll be at the meeting with my PD, right? I'll make the meeting."
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So the bureaucrat...
Everybody's got to attend meetings in the modern era.
So the bureaucrat becomes the hero. And in that sense, bureaucrats have an innate ability to withdraw their claws when they think the hive is telling them something.
But it hasn't changed in the digital age. Your colleague, Kristen McQuarrie.
What about her?
Last week, she writes a column essentially using a metaphor to talk about what is required in the absence of political will to advance the system change policies that are required to right the ship financially in the city of Chicago. And the Twitterverse, the kind of unhinged, hateful left in Twitterverse, screeches, and it gets around at the speed of a tweet. And all of a sudden, it's a much different response time, as well as response tenor than maybe it used to be when you were relegated to letters to the editor. Has that changed anything?
When I started, first of all, as far as Christian goes, she's a great writer. Mm-hmm. And people don't like it, too bad. She's a great writer, and there's an unseemly aspect of the relationship in the modern public square in which little insects with cartoon faces go on Twitter and tweet insults to you. And you can't let that get
It's not just me, then. It's good to know.
It's not just you.
Good.
And so when I started writing the column, there was no Twitter, there was no Facebook, right? We're getting out of that phase. I don't want to, it seems harder to write a column now than it had been in the past, just because first you have to check that anyone else writes something like this. Mm-hmm. Then you have all that Twitter stuff to deal with and the anger. And I think that that's part of our public discourse, is this seething shaming from the left. Now, does the right do the shaming as well? Do they try to shame? But how many conservatives are there in newspapers? I don't know. I think we meet in cells of 3.
Well, it is.
So that no one can find the.
Well, but this is the Alinskyite tactic, right, to make the majority feel like their opinions are that of the minority. So we have Republicans, and I think I'm kind of like you. I'm conservative by choice, Republican by necessity.
I'm not Republican
okay.
at all.
Well, I'm Republican by necessity.
I've been cured of it by Bush, by Jim Thompson, Jim Edgar, and the rest of them.
That will cure you of being a Republican.
Completely free.
But you're kind of a negative partisan. You're an independent, but I'm
an independent libertarian conservative.
But you dislike the Democrats more than the Republicans.
I dislike.
It's not like you're voting to re-elect Rahm or Pat Quinn.
I don't have any interest in electing people who grow the state.
So when you're talking about, Thompson and Edgar and these big government Republicans accused you of being a Republican, you're essentially talking about the phrase that you popularized, bipartisan combine, that afflicts Illinois, and to some extent you see that at the federal level now, which is why people are so upset about Republican majorities in the House and the Senate in Washington, D.C., who have gone along sort of to get along with President Obama rather than putting in the fight the way that people anticipated they would put in when they elected to have balance in government at the federal level, something we don't enjoy at the state level.
The same animosity that the left has for the machine Democrats is what conservatives have for what they call establishment Republicans. They create a combine, which works as a, for in the column, because it's not only a combination, but a machine that chops down everything in its path. It just chops and wheat and chaff, a machine working together. So yeah, of course, why? No one is surprised on your program and in my column. We talk about how no one should be surprised that Donald Trump, right, a nominal Democrat with a big mouth, who thinks his brain farts are policy, is so popular. Well, because of the combine.
So this is a mutual columnist we both enjoy, academic we both enjoy. Walter Russell Mead writes in the American Interest that Donald Trump is kind of a populist nihilist, which is kind of a new phrase.
Right.
But what he's essentially saying is that, is Trump a scam? Yeah, Trump's a scam, but he's calling out the whole thing as a scam. Correct. And that's why he has currency with a quarter of the Republican primary electorate, because they see the whole thing as a scam too, and they're not on the inside of the scam benefiting from it, they're on the outside paying for it. That's why there's the anger, that's why there's the Trump appeal.
And they see, you look at Mitch McConnell, for God's sake, okay? If you took a picture of a photograph of Mitch McConnell and Harry Reid together, and then gave it to Hogarth, the great cartoonist of the 18th century,
right,
they're perfect for that period. The same face, the same mannerisms, the same sleekness. And yeah, people are upset. So a demagogue like that comes up. What did you call him?
Populist nihilist.
Populist nihilism. Very
interesting. We're getting a lot of new phrases in this election cycle thanks to Trump.
There are a lot of things happening in politics nationally and locally. I had hoped that after the Bush years, after the war, and you can see now how corrosive wars are, something I didn't understand politically at the time. I was told about it, but I didn't see it. So the war, to get money to prosecute the war, he spends the country in trillions into debt. The Republicans expect payment, like from Denny Hastert, the coach of virtue that he is, and you see the destruction of a political party. And I had hoped that there would be a debate over that, right? Where are they going as a political party? Trump moves in, so that debate can't happen.
Well, does Trump block that debate, or does he?
Don't you think so?
Does he exacerbate the disaffection, which then demands the debate, and other legitimate political figures enter the fray?
Maybe. I mean,
and he pushes them to be more honest.
I had hoped
if not witless.
Up the elevator? What was that one?
Witless Abe rides down escalator. Yes, Kevin Williams and hats up.
Nice, yeah.
But I mean, is that the function that Trump plays, and is there a role for somebody in Illinois to play as similarly to the role that Trump is playing at the federal level, both in Chicago and the state more generally? Is the politics in Illinois just too civil? Is it too congenial between the two parties, the combine, as you call it?
Even Bruce Rauner, who represents sort of the equestrians' panic at the dismal state of affairs, is fighting Madigan, but he dealt with Ron, the bottle of wine thing.
Sure.
Daley, he played that game as well. is there a revolutionary figure that can come and reshape the party? I don't know if that person wants to run.
Well,
I don't know if that person wants to run, but if he does, he can always call me, and I would have a good column.
Well, I'll pass the word along to
Okay.
the unnamed him.
Right.
So let me ask you this question about Mark Kirk. You brought up Mark Kirk,
Oh, yeah.
the Rhino, as you call him.
Get lost.
What do you say to those Republicans who agree that the combine exists and
I know they agree.
disagree with some of the positions Mark Kirk has taken, not just recently, but going all the way back to his initial support for cap and trade?
Yeah.
But say, look, Mark,
Or Planned Parenthood.
well, right, more recently.
Or he's sucking up to Dick Durbin, the bullhead, Senator Bullhead. He's sucking up to him.
Or his vote against school choice.
Over.
His vote against school choice. But what do you say
That's
to
the
those?
Moonset, by the
What do
way.
you say to those rank and file Republicans who are common sense, who aren't part of this
I'd rather
combine?
have Tammy Duckworth than
Well,
this
so
guy.
okay, so that's essentially the answer to the question: is what do you say to those people who say, well, look, if it's this kind of choice of this more relativist choice, which general elections often are, Kirk versus Duckworth. Kirk is better on national security issues like the Iran deal than Tammy Duckworth.
Why, what's she done?
And on
Is
balance,
she supporting the president?
Well,
She's one of the few Democrats supporting the
she
president
is.
on Iran?
She is.
We'll see.
Well, Tammy Duckworth is, she's been a roll call vote for the Democrat establishment.
Right.
And you could say the same thing about Kirk, but the Republican establishment is right more than the Democrat establishment, so that's why you have to vote for Kirk.
Personally, I'm not giving policy here. I haven't even written a column. But just personally, right now,
Yeah.
my gut reaction is I would not go with Kirk. I kind of like Kirk. I think he's kind of funny, and he...
Especially lately.
Yeah, I thought the Bro With No Hoe thing was funny. Okay?
Lindsey Graham didn't.
Lindsey
Go too close to
Graham did.
home, I think.
I think Lindsey Graham kind of laughed. I think there's a sort of, I don't know when this whole PC thing took over, but, and Axelrod's part of it, this whole, oh my God, what did they say? Oh my God,
Right.
I
Everything
just
requires
had
a
it.
trigger warning and a
I
safe
just had
space
it,
to
you know.
protest or riot, as the case may
let's
be.
have our protest space, our First Amendment space.
Well, we don't want a safe space to protest over near Trip Tower because that's where you smoke your cigarettes. So I want you to be able to do that in
my
peace.
cigars.
Oh, you're off the...
Yeah.
Well, I thought you were still smoking cigarettes, not because you
No.
like cigarettes, but because you wanted to pay your cigarette tax money to help the state's
No.
healthcare
I have
system.
my cigar in the garden.
Tony
And you're
Peck.
welcome to come and see.
Tony
You
Peck.
and Tony Peck, does she have a cigar there too? I've missed her.
I don't know, but we're going to find out. John Kass, thank you for swimming upstream and joining us.
Just like the salmon I am.
Exactly. To spawn and die. Thank you for joining us
Thanks
on
for having me.
Against the Current. We appreciate it.
Thank you.